Welcome back to the Pence Perspective podcast. And today, what we're going to be talking about is not the NBA, not professional wrestling, but actually a Christian devotional. And so, if this is your thing, I appreciate that. You can hop off. I appreciate you checking it out, anyways. And what I want to talk about is in the book of John. We're going to talk John 8, 1 through 11. It's a familiar story for a lot of you. But I'm going to read those 11 verses, then we'll continue on. It says, "But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Now early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came to him. And he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, 'Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what do you say?' This they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear. So when they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, 'He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first.' And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience," knows that phrase, "went out one by one, beginning with the oldest even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. And when Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, 'Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you?' She said, 'No one, Lord.' And Jesus said to her, 'Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more.'" Like I said, this is probably a familiar story. In a lot of ways, we've heard of the story taught or preached. We have a woman caught in the act of adultery. She was either married, or she was having an affair, or having an affair with a married man. But they caught her in the act, and the religious leaders brought her to Jesus, and they were just trying to catch him in something, almost like they were thinking, "Yeah, let's see what this guy is going to say about this. Now we'll have him." And instead of responding, Jesus stoops down and he wrote on the ground, and they kept prodding him and asking him. And finally he speaks and says in verse 7, he says something that we hear a lot about. He says, "He who is without sin among you, throw a stone at her first." He says, if you don't have sin, you throw the stone at her first. And so verse 9 tells us, he writes on the ground again after that, and verse 9 tells us their response. They heard it, and they were convicted by their conscience. And one by one they filed out. And notice that phrase, convicted by their conscience. You know, a lot of people in 2026 want to quote Matthew 7:1. And if you're sitting there, you probably quote Matthew 7:1 if you think about it. It says, do not judge. Don't judge. Judge not. And what does that verse actually, what does the whole thing say, though? It says, "Judge not that you be not judged." We quote that verse, and the reality is we judge people every single day, just like the Pharisees over here in John 8. We think to ourselves, "Ugh, why do they eat like that? Why do they dress like that? Why are they so weird? Oh, just shut up." They think they're so cute. They think they're so funny. They think they're so popular. They think they're so great. And on and on and on. We judge every single day. And Matthew 7 continues on saying, "With what manner you judge you yourselves, you will be judged." And so Jesus goes on and says, you get the plank out of your eye before you get the speck out of your brother's eye. What Jesus is really saying is this. He's asking the question. He says, which is bigger? Just think about this. Which is bigger, a plank or a speck? A plank is. So you get the big stuff out of yourself first before you dare try to get the little things out of somebody else. And so what Jesus is really saying is judge yourself first, and then you see if you have standing to just judge someone else. And guess what? We don't have that right. We don't have that right to be the judge. The Pharisees in John 8 realized that real quick in verse 9. Jesus had told them, if you don't have sin, throw the first stone. And their conscience convicted them, and they realized while they hadn't committed the sin that she had committed and was caught in, they did have sins they have committed, and they didn't have standing to judge her, and they had no right to throw the stone at her first, just like we don't have the right to throw stones at people in our lives. But here's the reality of what we would do in 2026. In 2026, before Jesus even got those words out, we'd have a stone lobbed at their head. You know it's true. We know what we see it every day. We would have a Facebook post. We would have a tweet. We would have some kind of video that we'd be making fun of somebody. We would just go right after people. There's people all over this country that are all over this world that are doing the exact same things. But Jesus told us something in John 14:15. He says, "If you love me, keep my commandments." And you think, "Oh yeah, I got you. The 10 Commandments, bro. I got you. I won't lie. I won't cheat. I won't steal. I won't commit adultery. I'm good, man. We don't have idols. We good, fam. But in John 15:12, he tells us what his commandment is. He says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I've loved you. That's a little different. Love one another. Sounds so easy. But what about that person that you just can't stand? That person that rolls their eyes when you speak? That person that has the habit that drives you insane? The one that you feel is like, they feel like they can do no wrong, and maybe they're a teacher's pet if you're in school, or they're the favorite at your job, and you're like, man, I just can't stand it. Maybe that person you have history with. Because a lot of conflict is derived from our history. Maybe somebody you got history with. Is it easy to love that person? But Jesus told you to love that person like he loved you. And guess what? He loved you when you were unlovable too. He loved you when you were annoying, when you were whiny, when you were doing things that frustrated him. He still loves you, even when you're like that now. And you know how he can love you like that? Verse 9. You can love like that when your conscience convicts you that you aren't perfect either, and you sin and you have faults. Then you can stop judging everybody else and love them the way Jesus loves them. Wants you to love them. Be their cheerleader. Jesus told us in Matthew 18:3 and said, surely I say to you, unless you're converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Think about kids when you see them interacting with others and they cheer people on. There's this video I remember seeing on Instagram. This little guy named David, he calls himself the fastest runner alive, and he's on the bus and he just takes off the bus. I guess the bus driver's recording him. He takes off and just runs to his house, and he's running, he's really fast, and the kids are just cheering him, go David, go David, go David. And that's what kids do. They're everybody's cheerleader. They want to support their friends. And so as adults, we try to tear people down as we get older instead of being their cheerleader. We want people to fail. We want to see them stumble and fall. But instead of us being their cheerleader, we try to tear them apart. And kids love so easily. And we get so annoyed with grown-up stuff. And I say that with quotes. I wish we could be as loving as little kids are. And that's what Jesus says. Unless you become converted and become as little children, you would by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. You think about what kind of characteristics children have. It's not that Jesus wants you to be immature. He wants you to be relying on him as a child is relying on their parents. When you needed something when you were little, who did you go to? What did you do? You went to your parents. You went to your caregivers. You said, yeah, I'm hungry. I'd like something to eat. I need some clothes. Can you tie my shoes? That kind of thing. Now as we get to be adults, we think we don't need anybody. And we try to be isolated from people. And we don't want people to know when we need something. That's embarrassing to us, I guess. But that's not what Jesus says. If you don't become like little children, you won't enter the kingdom of heaven. You have to have that childlike faith. And so we would get over conflict easy as children. We wouldn't sit there and hold grudges for all eternity. Now we hold grudges for all eternity as older people. And so what Jesus wants us to do, he wants us to have that childlike faith and that childlike demeanor, not to be immature and be and not hold ourselves accountable for things. So let me ask you this. You may have been listening to this. This isn't a long message by any means, but what has your conscience convicted you of today? Have you been judging other people when you didn't have the right? Should you be loving the person that you're anxious to throw that proverbial stone at? That's a convicting question. Should you be loving that person instead of being ready to just lob a stone at their head? That's what Jesus showed us with the woman caught in adultery. They were ready to stone her. They were ready to put her to death. But he showed her love. He showed her grace. And he showed her mercy. And what was the end result? Verses 10 and 11 says, her accusers left. He said, where are your accusers? Does no one condemn you? And he says, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. But notice that command. Go and sin no more. Now, did that woman sin at some point in her life? Yeah. But what he's saying is, go and don't do this anymore. Don't do this sin anymore. So if you're thinking about something, you're praying about something as you've been listening to this message, and you're thinking, I need to treat that person better. I need to treat this person better. And you're praying about it. And you give it over to Jesus. Don't you take it back with you. Go away from it. Don't go keep doing it. Next time you see him, don't go and be hateful to that person. But go and not do that anymore. Do what God's calling you to do. Love that person. Realize you don't have the standing to stand there and lob the stones at them, and you need to love like He's loved you. Thank you for joining here on the Pence Perspective podcast, and also this is simulcast on Teach Christian. I do have some stuff for sale on Teach Christian. I have Teach Christian is a website I started for Christian educators and parents, but it's really open for anybody. There's blogs, there's devotionals on there. I also have ebooks. One of those is called Defining Faith. It's a short devotional. It's five days basically, to where we just explore what it means to have faith in Christ. And you will go through there. I think I've got it on there for like $1 or $2 right now, so it's definitely cheap. To find that, go to teachchristian.net. I do have a couple of other ebooks coming soon. One of them is going to be on the end times, and that is very close to being completed and being ready. And once that's done, I'll start advertising that as well. I also have online courses for Christian teachers. So if you're a Christian teacher and you are just looking for some biblical worldview training, really, I have classes on biblical classroom management, on team building, which is open for. It's not geared toward administrators at all. It's actually geared for anybody. And so I've got those up there. Also leadership, Christ-like leadership. And that's not just leadership for administrators. That's leadership for anybody that works in any kind of school setting or any kind of workplace. It's geared toward Christian teachers, but these things are all available for you. But you can find those at teachchristian.net. They're all on the front page. There's a link, and it has all of our online courses and all of our resources there. So, and our blog is there. Those blogs are free, and you can also subscribe to Teach Christian over there as well. We have a separate podcast feed for it. I'll be simulcasting a lot of these messages with it, so you'll probably see this one on there as well. But thank you for joining. We'll be back next time. This is going to be broadcast on a Sunday. We're going to be releasing the NBA podcast on Monday, so come back and join us for that one. Thank you. Have a great day.